Hi, I'm Elise Nelson, and today I will be going over my 4-week project of Photoshop CS6. So for my project, I wanted to learn Photoshop CS6 and get to feeling reasonably comfortable with the program and all of its different tools and its uses. I do feel reasonably comfortable with it, and I will continue to use it in other projects and also just day-to-day life as well. One of the reasons I really wanted to learn it is we always do a project at the beginning of the year in one of my technology classes where we create an ID for ourselves using Photoshop, and I really wanted to be able to work Photoshop well, get around the program well, and be able to know the tools and use them. So for the technology that I used Photoshop CS6, and I used YouTube tutorials to teach me how to use the different tools and everything else within Photoshop. Everything eventually worked, although sometimes it took quite a bit of trial and error before I figured out exactly how to use some of the tools or to do some of the mini projects. So these are all the YouTube tutorials that I used. I used quite a lot of them. I threw them all into a playlist on YouTube and went through them and just did all of the little mini projects with that. Alright, so then I had a project plan. You can see that down at the bottom there. The week of the plan, the tasks to complete, and then the proof. It's very good to have a timeline on these types of projects, especially for me. I tend to be a procrastinator, and so when I have something written out that tells me when I'm supposed to be doing different work or something like that, it's really helpful to keep me on track. I followed the plan pretty well. There was a minor adjustment I changed within the last 2 weeks. You can see that on week 2 I had said I would do more basics and begin the final project or projects, and then week 3 and week 4 would be the final project, kind of putting that all together. I changed that because I was having so much fun with the mini projects and it was teaching me so much that I decided to continue doing those instead of having to try and combine all of the skills that I had used into a huge big project. I don't know that I would have had time to do that in 2 weeks, and also I couldn't come up with a project that would combine everything that I had learned or that I wanted to continue learning, so I decided to just keep doing the smaller projects and just kind of build up my repertoire through that. Just in general overview, it's really important to use tutorials. I've used other Adobe programs before, mainly Adobe Illustrator, and when I was learning that one, I decided to do it kind of on my own rather than try to watch tutorials and kind of understand it faster and easier through someone else. But I decided to do that with Photoshop, and that really helped. It really cut down on the amount of time that it took me to learn each of the tools, and it really helped me put all of my knowledge together more seamlessly about Photoshop. And I feel like I understand that program better than I would have if I'd tried to do it all on my own. Problem solving is huge in Photoshop because several times the type of Photoshop that someone was using in a tutorial, they were maybe using CC instead of CS6 or something along the lines of that, which means the tools are in a different place. They may have a little bit different functions, so having to know enough about it that I could tweak the tutorials to do what I wanted it to. Also, using different pictures than the people in the tutorials made some of that a little bit more difficult as well. Would I change anything about the project, whether that was how I had done it or how much time I spent on different parts? I wouldn't. I really liked the way that the mini tutorials helped me to understand it and to just kind of get a better overall knowledge of Photoshop. And the most successful moment for me was probably being able to go back through and watching all kind of the screen captures of what I've done, and just being able to see how many skills that I have learned within this project. So now we shall go over And here I have a lot of the projects that I was working on pulled up. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of go through them and talk about each of these a little bit. This was the first project that I was trying to do. It was the very first thing I did in Photoshop. I wanted to learn how to use the marquee tool, so all of these shapes, and all except for the pink, but all of the gray in the background, these were all little rectangles that I'd boxed off with a marquee tool and then I'd colored inside of them. I guess it's very similar to kind of like one of the masks, except it's just only in that area, but you can move those boxes around. Then I learned how to use the warp tool with the pink rectangles. Well, let's see if I can grab one of those. Well, I took them and then I ended up just copying and then shortening some of them. Let's see, is this the first one? Yes. So this one, if you can see, well, it's those two, so never mind, we're not going to do that. But I took these rectangles and I used the warp tool, the transform tool, and then I went into the warp tool and shifted them so that their edges were more splayed, if you can see that, to make them look more like banners. And then I also went in with the rotate tool and moved them around so they were more, well, less horizontally aligned and turned a little bit more so it would look even more like a banner. I also played a little bit with fonts. I went and I learned how to upload fonts into Photoshop and chose a few different ones from there to kind of just discover how that worked. This was my first project. It's not really good, but that's okay. This was a photo manipulation that I decided to do. This was a bit harder than I was expecting it to be. When I first got these pictures off the internet, I was like, oh, it'll be easy, you just drop the one picture over the other. But when I did that, I realized that these, I guess, highlights where the light bounces off, obviously didn't show up on top of this picture because it was a different picture and it was covering up that layer. So I had to use the warp tool and bend this picture to kind of the edges, parameters of the glass, and then I had to go in and redraw all of these highlights all over the glass, which was a little bit terrifying because I hadn't really used the brushes much before that point, and I was a little bit worried that I was gonna get one that's gonna just throw stuff all over the page, but that didn't end up happening. The next thing I did is also, oh nope, here it is. There we go. This is a photo manipulation that I also did. It's actually, if you can see, there's that picture inside of it. Whoop. There is also that picture inside of it. And then for the light bulb itself, I had to use a lasso tool and clean out the inside to get all of the filaments and all those linings out. Also down here, you can kind of tell it's not a great job, but I had to try and use a mask and get around these pieces of grass so it wouldn't just look like a photo of a light bulb thrown on top of a photo of grass with two photos inside of it. And that took me, I don't know, probably about 40 to 50 minutes to complete this little mini project. This was based off of a tutorial that talked about bringing out colors in Photoshop, trying to make them pop more, trying to make the eyes stand out, try to deepen the color of the hair, make the lips more vibrant, all that kind of stuff, even out the skin tone, and deal with blemishes on the skin as well. So that's pretty easy to see. I didn't do super huge amounts of change on this lady's face. I kept it pretty simple, but it was a good way to learn my way around the whole masking idea and the group idea and all that kind of stuff. I didn't know too much about the masks before this. I didn't really know how to quick select or any of that kind of stuff, so this taught me about that. It also taught me about refining the edges and the feathering and the smart radius and all that kind of stuff, so that was really helpful to get me well on my way. This, oh goodness, it keeps skipping, sorry. This is a low poly res that I was working on. I decided I would try a little bit of it. Obviously this is not very good, but I wanted to try it out a little bit to get the understanding of snapping to the grid lines themselves, the fill tool, the shape tool, the way that you can just create the triangles and all that kind of stuff. So that was helpful with that. This, goodness gracious. So these three are different, it's a little bit different. This also used Illustrator. So what you would do is you would go into Illustrator and you would, let's see, obviously you can see this is different than that. So the background here, if you can see all these little lines, I created this shape or these shapes in Adobe Illustrator. After you've created your shape all on one layer, you highlight all of the shapes and you copy that onto the clipboard. Then you can just come right over here to Photoshop, because it is the same program, and just paste it onto this picture. And because of that, then what you're going to do is you're going to make sure that you are on the layer with the shape on it. Go over here to the magic wand tool. Well, actually here, we're going to get off of this. Select inside one of these spaces. Oh. And then you're going to copy that, move it to a different area, make sure you go down to, close this, go down to your background. Oh, this is when you copy it. Sorry, let me rephrase that. On this, you're going to make sure that you are on the part with the vector shapes. You're going to use the wand tool to select an area, drag that over to a different area of the photo, then you're going to go down, click on the background, copy it, and then you're going to, well, let's see. Maybe I can show you. So you drag it over here, you copy it, sorry, you make sure you're on the background, you copy it, you paste it, and then you're on the layer. Because you're on the layer, then you can drag this back over and fit it into this area. And then you use the keys to make sure it's in the right place. Now, I've already done all of this, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And I'm going to show you kind of, you can sort of understand how you do it. Now, you just drag it to different parts of the photo, wherever you want, and then you drag it back in and you place it somewhere. Okay. So that's what I did on this one. It's also what I did on this one. This one was a little bit, took a little bit longer. This one took about an hour to complete. I tried to kind of keep a little bit of color scheme going through this one. And I think this is the very first one of these that I tried. Okay. So here, this is when I was starting to learn double exposure. Trying to kind of come to terms with all of that. I had to watch a couple different tutorials before I really understood it. I think the problem is I was using photos that had a lot of interesting things in the base, or in the bottom of the picture, bottom half, and then in the top half of the picture there wasn't really anything you can see, so then the face kind of gets lost. That especially started happening here, so I had to try and bump up the bottom part, or try and get more here, which then in turn made the bottom part darker, which kind of messed that up a little bit. This is a reveal effect. So what it was, basically, you can see there's the picture, then you put a background layer after you've cut that out. You cut out, well, here, let's do this. So it's a picture of Audrey Hepburn. I cut her out and I moved her to a different layer. Then I put a white background layer underneath that, put a black vector mask on top, and then used a flower brush to kind of reveal her from the mask and try and not make it overly, I guess, see-through or also too colored, to just kind of keep it in a little bit of a misty-ish kind of feel. This is when I was trying to work with double exposure. I was working on it, and then it got to this point, and I decided I really liked the way that this ended up looking, so I decided to leave it here, and then just kind of played around with how, like, the contrast and the stuff within, like, curves, layer, levels, and all that kind of stuff. So that was kind of fun. Next, we're going to talk about color splash selection. This, I actually use the color range tool up here. And as you can see, it deals with, you can select different colors within it to take it out, or you can add it back in. So I spent a while doing this. This was the original thing, and then I just took out most of the greens and quite a bit of the blues. That's pretty self-explanatory. This, oh goodness, it's skipping all over. This is another one where I use the color range. If you'll look, you can see that it has a lot of other colors in it, but I kind of muted a lot of those down to try and just kind of bring out a couple different highlighted areas, which I really like the way that that ended up turning out. This is a really easy color splash technique. So what it is you get your background picture, you make a copy of it, and then you make it black and white. You can see that I did that here. And then what you do is you erase the parts of this picture that you want to be colored, so then you can see the colored background through that. It's really easy. It doesn't deal with any masks or anything else. Skipping things again. Okay, well, that's alright. So this is the original picture that I took before I made this. As you can see, let's see, that's the cutout that I took of her face. This is the original picture with just a gray background in the back. What I ended up doing was I added kind of a galaxy wallpaper thing to the back behind it, and I originally had planned to just add it to a cutout of her head, so the sparkles or the whatever it is would only be on her head, but then I really liked the way that it was looking in the background, as I did put a layer mask over it so it wasn't as easy to see. And then I erased a lot of the mask around her hair because you can see the sparkle through that a lot easier, and then muted it down a lot in the background. I also added black around the edges to give it a little bit more depth, and I added, or I took away some of the mask across her face and her skin, and I also kind of messed with the levels as far as how black and white it was, how big the contrast was, and how more muted the highlights and everything else was. Okay, so I think that is about it for all of me explaining them. I do, however, have a quick little screen capture thing here that I wanted to show you. It just kind of shows some of how I did some of this. So this is obviously the, hold on a second. This is obviously the reveal effect that I was talking about. This is me playing with the mask. This is playing with the flower brush. Now I'm moving on to, this was a thing where I was trying to combine a tiger's face with a lady's face. I used a tutorial for this as well. This took me probably some of the longest of all of my project. Probably took me about 2 or 3 hours to do this. It just was a lot of time spent trying to match the tiger perfectly to the face, and also trying to make sure that everything that I wanted to show was shown, but also that it was blended smoothly into the hairline. You could see the hair down on the chin, but not too much, so that it would be sticking out of the picture, looking more odd than it was supposed to. So you can see that this is just kind of that whole thing going on. We had to deal with the displacement masks and all that kind of stuff with this to try and match it to the face. You had to use the warp tool, you had to use the eraser, you had to use curves and layers and all that kind of stuff throughout the whole thing. So this is me just kind of finalizing it. You can see how it matches pretty well to her face now, this was probably also one of the other most exciting parts of this project for me, was being able to finish this project because it was so difficult, and it also ended up with one of the best results that I got out of the whole thing. So this is the one where I'm working on the double exposure. This is one of the ones where I used a background. You can see there's a lot of white in it, then there's a lot of darker colors. The colors don't really mix too well, which also means that it was a lot harder for it to, if you can tell right now, I was struggling to kind of get it to look a little bit natural. I decided I would maybe, this is back to the tiger, meshing the tiger on her face, and just kind of showing how you use the refine tool and all that kind of stuff to get that to fit. This is another double exposure that I tried. This one also didn't go very well at all. Again, you can see I used a background that had a lot in the bottom and nothing in the top, so when I was trying to match her face to it, it really didn't work. This one also, the landscapes can work. I just wasn't using the right ones, and also I think maybe using the black and white was a little bit more difficult than if I would have used color. So that's probably something I will try next time. This is going back to the first project I did. If you can see, I'm using the marquee tool, kind of matching it to the other sizes. And then I decided I didn't like that. So then I went back to the original size that they were, and I'm spacing them out. Doing that and just kind of coloring them in with the color that I wanted. This was me kind of figuring out how to use the warp tool. I made a whole bunch of horizontal lines, and then I decided to use the warp tool to move them around, make them fit a little bit more interestingly on the page, and try and kind of figure that tool out. And this really did help me with that. I became a lot more proficient to use with the warp tool after that. And this is me working on the low poly project. As you can see, making a lot of triangles, having to kind of go around, try and pick different parts that are going to help show the varied color of this. I think it's a leopard. I'm not sure though. But yeah, you can see how I'm going around the eye there. This is the color reveal. I've already done most of it, but you can see here I'm erasing different parts of it. I ended up not really liking the whole way that part looked, so I ended up, I think, keeping that without the color. This is another color reveal. This one is using the mask. You can see down there to the right how I am on the layer, or on the vector mask, and just kind of taking away and showing that. This is the color reveal that I was talking about earlier. When I showed you, it's really easy to do. You just click on the different colors that you want to be there and the ones that you don't, and then it'll take them out for you, which is really helpful. I did spend quite a bit of time on this one just because I wasn't really liking the color combinations that I got. I did end up going in with just a regular brush, and then turning down the opacity to different levels, trying to bring in a little bit more of the other color to see if I liked that a little bit better. And I did on parts of it, but not all of it. So I decided to keep some of it, take some of it out, and just continue working through all of that. Let's see what we can skip. skip to here? Oh, this is the geometric design that I was talking about. I've already pasted this into Photoshop from Illustrator. And as you can see, I'm grabbing the different sections, dragging them around, and then dragging them back and fitting them in. Again, this took me about 50 minutes to complete in total. It's pretty fun to do. It can kind of, you can lose track of time really easily when you're doing this. I know I did. I ended up doing about 3 projects that same night. I think it ended up taking me about 2.5, 3 hours to get everything that I wanted. This is again another color range, color reveal thing that I was working on, trying to see what exactly, how exactly I could use that and in what different ways it could do things for me. This is when I put it over this girl's face. I didn't use, or I didn't take a screen capture the whole time of this project, but I did do it for a while. You can see here as I'm dragging that background over. So I put it into the layer mask, and then I decided that I wasn't a huge fan. So I started here, you can see, to kind of remove that layer and try and show her face a little bit more. I did like the way that was looking, but I didn't like the way it showed up on her face. So you can see here that I've kind of taken that off of her face and kind of kept it mainly to her hair. And I was looking on the side and I liked the way that the kind of, I call them sparkles for lack of a better term, are showing up around the outside. So I decided to add more of that, but then I also didn't want it to be as present as it was in the hair. I decided to take it off of black and white later, but you can see right here that I was still black and white there. This is me creating the shapes in Illustrator. You just use the shape tool, you move it around, you fit it where you want it to go, and then you copy it and you paste it into Photoshop. But yeah, I've used Illustrator before, so it's really easy to just go back in and do whatever I wanted to do with that. Illustrator is pretty easy. I feel like it's easier than Photoshop to use, a little bit more user-friendly. So there's not too much to talk about with this. So then you copy it, you paste it into your other thing. I went back and I changed it all to white so it would show up in a different color. I wanted it more that color. So then here is when I'm going to go in, and I thought about putting this over to try and vary the colors, but I didn't like the way that looked. So here you can see I've started kind of filling in all of these sections using the wand selection tool to highlight entire areas. When you're doing the wand selection tool, you want to make sure that your wand tool is on contiguous. That's going to keep it within the boundaries of the layer that you're on. I struggled with that the first project that I was working on with this. I didn't understand how to keep it from selecting the similar colors instead of keeping it within that, but that's because I had the contiguous not checked on the top, and you'll be able to see that if you're using that tool. It should show up along the top line. So that's going to go through the rest of that. But yeah. So this has been my Photoshop project. I learned a lot of different things, and I really enjoyed doing everything that I learned, and I'm sure I'm going to continue using it in the future. Thanks for watching it.